Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to introduce Ricou Browning. Obviously, you guys have seen his work. Now we're going to ask him some questions, and of course you guys are more than welcome to ask as many questions as you like. So tell us a little bit about who you are, as obviously we know who you are, but we want to hear from the man himself.
Well, thank you. I think, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I want to thank you for coming to Spooky Empire. Without you guys here, there wouldn't be a Spooky Empire. So thanks for coming. And you saw some of the things that I have worked on. And if you have any questions about any of it, please ask me. And I'll try to give you the best answers I can give you. So, anybody have any questions?
I have one. I wanted to pull out this magazine for you so you can look at this picture that I brought, because the question applies to the picture. You might want to take somebody else.
Speak up a little louder.
There's a magazine that I brought here with me. I wanted to show you a picture in here. There's a part that here. Hold on one second. Find it.
Yes, sir.
Hey, anything interesting? You did the James Bond Thunderball?
Thunderball was a great picture to work on because I didn't have a budget that I had to worry about. It was a limited budget, unlimited budget. And we spent 3 months filming the underwater sequences for Thunderball. And we could do what we wanted, and no one said, hey, hurry up. So I really
One
enjoyed
take,
making
no,
that
one
film.
take. You had more than, you did more than one take on a lot of stuff, probably.
Now, you got your start doing dive shows and springboard diving shows in Central Florida. How did you parlay that into a film career?
Well, I didn't. I lucked up into getting a film career. Starting with The Creature from the Black Lagoon, I was going to Florida State University, and I used to work at Wakulla Springs, where the underwater sequences for The Creature from the Black Lagoon was filmed. And the manager of that spring was out of town. He called me at the school where I was and said, we have some people coming from California to make a film, and would you show them the springs for me? And I said, sure. So I picked the people up, took them to the springs, and showed them the underwater and the beautiful river scenes. And the cameraman said, would you mind swimming in front of the camera to show some perspective of the size of a human being with fish, grass and logs and whatever? And I said, sure, so I did. And I took them back to the airport. They went home. A couple of weeks later, I got a call from Mr. Perry, the manager of the hotel. He says, they're trying to reach you. They like the way you swim, and they want to talk to you about working on the film. So he gave him my number, and Jack Arnold, who turned out to be the director of the film, called me. He said, we like the way you swim. How would you like to be the monster? And I said, monster of what? And they said, we're doing an underwater horror film, and we have an underwater creature. And would you like to do it? And I said, sure. So I went to California, and it took 2 months to build a suit. And the suit they first built was no good. It looked bad. And so we built a second suit. And then everyone liked it, and that's the one we used. And they filmed the topside sequences at the back lot at Universal Studios in California. We filmed the underwater sequences at Wakulla Springs near Tallahassee, Florida. And it took us, we were working on it for about 3 months, but we actually filmed for about a month on the underwater sequences for the first creature film. The second creature film, the underwater sequences were shot at Silver Springs. The third movie didn't have much underwater, but part of it was filmed at Wakulla Springs and part of it at Silver Springs. What was the thing about the magazine?
I found the picture.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is that Forey Ackerman has all kinds of movie artifacts in his house. And according to this picture, there's a creature foot that he has in the house. Did you know anything about it?
A creature foot? You mean the suit?
Yeah, part of the suit. I don't.
As far as I know, all of the creature costumes rubber rotted years ago.
Yeah.
However, there was one which survived, so to speak. But it looks like a melted piece of junk. But it was sold at auction for $80,000.
Whoa!
And whoever bought it, I don't know what they're going to do with it. I didn't get you part of the $80,000.
Well, when I looked at this picture, the thing is that I looked at like some of the Ben Chapman pictures were color, and it looked like the claws and everything were a reddish color. And according to this picture, I want you to see. According to this picture, it looks like it had the original color.
Well, it could be. I can't tell you.
Would something like that survive that long?
I doubt it. I mean, it would be a mess because it's like tires on your car. You know, they only last so long, and then they
So you've probably seen some of
rot away.
the one that was deteriorated.
The one that was deteriorating, I just saw a picture of it. I didn't see the actual suit.
So this is probably a remake.
I don't know. I can't tell. I don't know.
It's amazing that it has that orangish color.
Yeah. Well, the
In
suit was
claws.
green. The whole suit was green.
The claws like reddish orange
Uh,
color.
no, not really.
They weren't.
No, somebody added that.
Now, in those days, during the filming of those movies, you weren't using scuba gear.
No, the way I breathed, I used an air hose. I don't know if anybody's aware of a spring called Wikiwachi Springs. That's where the girls breathe from an air hose. Well, I started the springs with New Perry when it first began. And we taught the girls to swim with the air hose and do their underwater ballet and so forth. So breathing from the air hose was something that I did naturally. So when we made the costume, they wanted to put a tank in the back and have a regulator in your mouth. But it was so bulky, it looked very, very awkward. In other words, your head would have been this big and your back would have been that thick. So we didn't use that because I knew how to use the air hose. And I'd use the air hose, I'd breathe from it, and I had 4 safety people. And when I'd go into the scene, hold my breath, do as much of the scene as I could, and then I would get a hose from another safety diver to breathe from. And we had a signal, because the creature was always moving, you know, in the water, your hands, or swimming, or doing something, fighting. And I signaled to the divers was, if I went totally limp, that meant I need air. And it worked out perfect. We didn't have any accidents, and I got air when I needed it, and the safety divers were all very good.
What's an air hose?
Do
Like
what?
how much air does the air hose hold? I mean, even like 5 minutes?
Well, no, the air hose, there's a compressor
Right,
up topside, and they pump air down through the hose.
okay.
And then you have, it's kind of like in your backyard, if you want to drink water out of a hose, you have water running out, you drink what you want and you let the rest spill out. Well, air is the same way. You breathe what air you want and let the rest just spill out wherever it is. One of the funny things was, when I exhaled, when I'm breathing from the hose, because my mouth was in here, and the suit's mouth was about that far from my mouth. So when I breathed, I would exhale, and bubbles would come up inside over my eyes up into the top of the head. And then they had to go somewhere, so they would go out the top of the head. It looked like a stream of bubbles.
And the second one, we noticed that.
So in the movie, just before I would go into a scene, I would press down on the top of my head to squeeze all the bubbles out, so you wouldn't see it. But if you watch close, in a lot of the scenes, you will see bubbles coming out of the top of the head.
We had like a blowhole on the top of your head.
Now, in the film industry at that time, was that common practice? Or were other,
What, squeeze bubbles out of your head?
no, the air hose system? Or were other film companies, other studios using scuba tanks for that type of situation?
Well, at that time, you know, scuba was something fairly new.
Yeah, it was new.
And there were no regulations about safety, there were no regulations about anything as far as diving is concerned. As a matter of fact, when I did a show called Sea Hunt in the Bahamas, we shot there for 3 years, underwater shooting sea hunt. I came home and started doing some other work underwater. And I went down to a dive shop to get my tanks filled with air, and they wouldn't give me any air. And I said, what's going on? They said, you're not a member of PADI or DADI or whatever the things are. And I said, no, I'm not. And they said, well, you can't get any air. So my daughter happened to be certified, so I had her go down and fill my tanks, because I hadn't joined one of those thingamajigs.
How many pictures did you do for Universal, and did you ever come across any of the Universal monster staples? I mean, Karloff or anything like that?
Would you speak a little louder?
I'm sorry, yeah. How many pictures did you do for Universal? And did you ever come across anyone, any of the other big monsters from the Universal pictures?
I did 3 pictures with Universal, the 3 creature movies, not any other. As far as meeting any of the other monsters, I did not. In the makeup room, however, they had faces up on the wall on shelves of all of the people that they made masks for. And it was very interesting. They had Boris Karloff and Lon Chaney and all the others. And I don't know what happened to those models that they had behind them, but they're around somewhere. They were made of probably plaster
Plaster of Paris?
of Paris.
Did you wear goggles or a mask under the mask for visibility?
No,
or
we
just
were
open
going to
your
use a
eyes?
face mask. Excuse me, yes, a face mask, but it stuck out too far. You know, it would force the face out too far. And then we tried goggles, but the problem with goggles, they worked okay, but once water got in one, you couldn't get the water out. So we didn't use any, I just used my bare eyes. And the eyes of the suit sat about this far from my eyes.
Wow.
And then there was a hole like the size of this, so it was kind of like looking through a keyhole. And then with blurred vision, as you know, if you're swimming underwater with no mask on, your vision is blurred, so it's looking through a keyhole with blurred vision. And if I looked at you from here, I could see you were a body, but I couldn't tell who you were.
Right.
And until I got much, much closer. So vision was one of the hardest things in using the suit underwater.
How long would a session be of shooting till you got exhausted, or what was the limit of that?
Well, when you work for a company that, you know, is looking out for dollars, you work all day. So we would dive all day long. We'd come up, we'd talk about a scene, rehearse the scene on the barge, and I'd have the head off at that time, but I'd keep on the suit. And then I'd put the suit back on, we go down and shoot the scene that we talked about. And if there are minor corrections, you could do it underwater. If not, we would come back up, rehearse the scene again on the barge, and then go back under and do the scene again. And we would shoot all day long. I'd say all day long, like starting at 9 when the sun is up, and then shoot to about 4 in the afternoon, and take a break for lunch. But we shot all day, and it was wintertime. The temperature was 38 to 40 degrees, and the water temperature was 71 degrees. So it was very chilly, and I kept the suit on most of the day, and I was cold. And when we first started shooting, people started feeling sorry for me because I was chattery, and they would come over and give me a little shot of brandy. Well, everybody got nice. Everybody got a shot of brandy. So pretty soon they had a drunk preacher, and so they took in brandy.
We have a question back here?
Yeah, actually, sea hunt, I'm a diver. Sea hunt's probably the reason I became a diver. I really like that work. Just, you were in on the ground floor of underwater cinematography with the sea hunt and the creature. Just any stories about innovations or, you know, equipment modifications you had to do that were brand new for either one of these?
When we started Sea Hunt, that's just after the scuba gear was discovered by Cousteau. And we had the double hose regulators, as you remember. And they were not as easy to use as the more recent ones with the single hose and so forth. And we would have fight scenes where we'd cut everybody's air hose and, you know, do all kinds of different things of that nature. But we used to spend time playing tricks on each other, which would sharpen your mind a little bit, such as just before somebody would jump in the water, you turn their tank off, you turn all the air off. And they'd jump in, they can't get any air. So underwater, they'd have to reach back, take their tank off and open the valve again. Or then they got wise to that, so before you put the regulator on, you put a dime over the hole and then put the regulator on. Now they have to take it off, move the dime, put it back on, and then get some air. So we do crazy things like that, but it made you a lot sharper.
And how in the world did you shoot the spear gun scenes? Was that they just look amazing?
Well, no, there are several different ways to shoot something like that. As an example, if he were going to shoot me with a spear gun and we were further away from each other, the camera could be on him shooting, and he would shoot, and the spear, of course, would just take off. But as he shot, they would put pan over here, and I would be the one receiving the spear. I'd already have the spear in my chest, and when they whipped pan, I would move like that and look like that spear just went into my chest. So there are different tricks of how to do those things.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
On the topic of dive gear development, I know you worked on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yeah.
Great movie, one of my favorites. I know they had to develop specific dive gear for the underwater scenes that encompassed the bell helmets and all that stuff. Were you involved in any of that?
Not in the development of it. I was involved in wearing it.
Okay.
And they were total disasters. All it was you had on a suit, which was supposed to be a dry suit, but it wasn't. You were wet. And you had a collar, you put this helmet over, and it would just barely attach here. And inside, you were just breathing with the regular scuba outfit. I mean, it was no different.
So it's just basically covering it up.
Yeah,
covering
it hid all the sins of scuba.
Gotcha. Okay.
And if you went upside down, you were in serious trouble. But we wore heavy boots with lead on them, and it worked out well, and we had good safety people, and we didn't have any accidents. It worked out good.
Yes.
What was your favorite creature film?
My which?
Favorite creature film to work on?
My favorite creature film. I liked the first one best. Jack Arnold, who was the director, he liked the second one best.
Did he?
Yeah, and I don't think anybody liked the third one very much.
Too sad.
And I think the reason they spent, I think the first creature movie was $900,000, close to $1 million. The second one was not very much. And then the third one, they didn't spend anything. So they were just trying to put out the thing, living off the first one to make some money.
Anything about Ivan Tors? How you got involved with him?
Yeah, Ivan Tors, he was the producer of Sea Hunt, and that's where I met Ivan. And Ivan was a great producer and very innovative. And he did a lot of shows prior to Sea Hunt, science fiction shows. And I didn't know him at that time. But once I got to know him, he knew how to use people in the sense that if he saw you could do something and you have the ability to do it, he would give you the opportunity to do it. And he got me started in doing underwater stuff, directing, and then I went into topside directing. But he gave me all of those opportunities. He's a great guy.
Did that somehow have a connection with your flipper stuff that you did with the original? Is there any connection there?
Ivan?
Yeah.
Flipper was an unusual beginning. I was working somewhere and I came home, the kids were watching Lassie on television. And I sat down and I can remember back when I was in high school that I had gone and saw a show at Marineland Studios in Florida of dolphins and how intelligent they were. And then I remember another thing that happened when I was in school reading about the Romans and the boys riding the dolphin. And then later I remember we went to South America and captured freshwater dolphins and brought them back to Silver Springs. And I worked with them for several months, and they were as tame and as good as the saltwater dolphin. Well, anyway, all of that in my mind, I sat down watching Lassie with the kids, and I said, why not do a show about a boy and a dolphin? And that's where it began. And then over a period of a year or so, myself and my brother-in-law, Jack Cowden, we wrote a story called Flipper. And I wanted to sell it as a book. So I went to New York with my last $100 in my pocket, And I went to different bookstores trying to sell it as a book. I got one company, I think it was Doubleday, interested in it. But I came home and I never heard from any of them. But I got a bright idea that having worked with Ivan on Sea Hunt, I called him and I said, Ivan, would you do me a favor? And he said, what? I said, would you say you're interested in making my book into a movie? It's about a boy and a dolphin. He said, yeah, I'll say that. He said, but send me a copy. So I did. And then I called the book company and I said, hey, I got a producer in Hollywood who wants to make this into a movie. To try to get them to make it into a book. Didn't work. But a couple of weeks later, I got a call from Ivan, and he says, you know, I read your story, I read your book, and I didn't read it first, my wife did, and she made me read it, and I love it, and let's make a movie. So he got with MGM, got the financing, and we made the first Flipper movie, and that's how it began.
Now, as well as Sea Hunt and Flipper, which you directed 37 episodes of, were you involved with any of the filming and the stunt coordinating for Flipper, or any of those other shows, as well as the Aquanauts?
Yes, in Flipper I directed all the underwater scenes.
Okay, every single one?
Yeah. And in Sea Hunt I directed the last 2 years underwater sequences. And
The Aquanauts.
the Aquanauts, yes, I did all the underwater
You
scenes.
did all the other. Now, you've obviously worn many hats. You've done stunt work, you've done directing, producing, writing. Is there any one that you prefer over the other, or do you like doing them all equally?
I enjoy doing all of them, but stunt work, you get tired of it because you get hurt every now and then. So I gave up on that. And directing I really enjoy, but writing is a lot of fun. I'm not a great writer, but I'm a slow writer, and I love to write things. Right now we're writing other stuff, but it takes a lot of time.
You've done obviously a lot of underwater work, a lot of work with the explosions, and a lot of stunt work, a lot of dangerous work. Is there anything you were actually particularly worried about your safety doing?
No, during our filming and most of the underwater sequences of all the shows I worked on, I used all the same crew. And in those days, at least in the early days, we had no communication underwater except hand signals. And we worked out a system of hand signals that you could just about talk to each other. And it worked out perfect. After we finished a show like Thunderball, which we also used hand signals, then we started using other equipment where you can talk to each other underwater. When I did the model work on Raise the Titanic in Malta, we had communications underwater. And I found it was very distracting in the sense that everybody just wanted to talk and not work. So you had to shut them up. And it's easier to work with the hand signals, but it's better with the talking.
Movies themselves, where they actually filmed all three of them locations? Where were they at? On their sets or out here in Florida? Where they actually at?
Are you referring to the creature films?
Yeah.
He's asking where the films were filmed. All three
In the
movies.
creature film, in the first creature film, the underwater sequences were filmed at Wakulla Springs, 18 miles south of Tallahassee, Florida. And the topside sequences were shot on the back lot at Universal Studios in California. The second creature film was filmed all in Florida at Marineland Studios, underwater at Silver Springs. The third creature movie was filmed California, topside, underwater at Wakulla Springs and Silver Springs, but there was very little underwater in the third movie.
The camera, the underwater camera, the first creature you said came before Sea Hunt. Was that a very bulky package to operate? Was it a one-man operation?
The camera that we used in the first creature movie, as you know, they were all shot in 3D, but only shown a short period of time in 3D. And Scotty Wellborn, who was the cameraman, built the housing and also arranged the cameras. There was 2 cameras in the housing, and they have to be a certain distance apart and everything. It's very critical. And he built all of the equipment, built the housing, and also shot the film, of course. And I don't know much about cameras other than pointing them. And he did all the work and did a marvelous job.
One man.
It flooded twice on us, and they had to get the equipment working again in a couple of days afterwards.
Thank you.
Now, you mentioned in the past that you consider, you know, taking into account all the work you've done in film, that the work you did for the creature films was basically just an acting job. Now, with that in mind, at the time when you guys were filming this, did anybody have any concept that this movie would be something as great as it is now? And how do you feel about the fact that the creature is now considered part of Universal Studios' legacy of famous monsters?
Well, when we shot the creature film, I think everyone, except me, because I was just getting involved in film work, most of the actors, Julie Adams and Richard Carlson and Richard Denning, I think they thought they were working on a B-class horror film. And they didn't want to do it, much less be associated with it. But they did it because they were paid to do it, and they had contracts with the studios to work on films. So the film was made and released in 3D, but shown only a couple of weeks in 3D, and then shown single strip, and it became a success. And I think it shocked everybody, even the studio. And at that time, Universal was in a little bit of trouble financially, and I think the creature helped pull them out of the red. And so they were happy with it after that. And then everybody sort of forgot about it. After all three creature films were made, it wasn't, I think, as far as I was concerned, about 20 years later, I started getting fan mail. And I thought, what are really people sending fan mail about the creature? Because it's kind of like if you have a job at the bank and you're a teller, and you work there for, say, 6 months, and you quit, you go somewhere else, and 20 years later somebody says, do you remember when you worked at the bank and you did this and this at the teller? How do you remember that? You know, people are asking me questions about the creature show 20 years later, and I can't remember all of it. And a lot of them knew more about it than I did. And I was amazed and shocked that people were still interested in it. I'm happy about it. And I guess that's why you folks are here, and I'm happy about it.
What was the first show like this that you got involved in?
The first show I did like this was with Pete down in Fort Lauderdale at a motel. He had his first show.
The first
And that was the first show I did.
Yeah.
That was the first one? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you recently did some work on the HBO show Boardwalk Empire, didn't you?
No,
you didn't.
No, broad work, I got a letter, somebody asked me about it. My son is in the film business.
Okay.
And he's a Ricou Jr. And he was a stunt coordinator and marine coordinator on that show.
So he does the same type of work that you've been doing?
Yeah, and he's doing a show right now in Tampa about a tailless dolphin. They have a little dolphin that was born without a tail, and some of the big rubber companies are building an artificial tail for the dolphin to swim with, and it works. And so someone got the idea, well, let's make a feature film about it. And so they're now preparing to shoot a show about this tailless dolphin at Clearwater, I guess it is. Kind of like a flipper show. And I guess they're filming it sometime this year.
Okay, in the first feature film, when they found the hand in the mud, is that supposed to have been your mate?
Looks like what?
Was that supposed to have been the creature's mate? Because he was always looking for a mate.
I don't know.
Oh, okay. I just always thought that he lost a mate and he was searching for a mate.
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I read some scripts that people were submitting, and also myself and Vincent Dufay have written a script about a remake of The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And there are so many different versions, it's unbelievable where they're going. Whether they'll ever do a remake, I don't know.
Was it hard for you to adjust to wearing the suit? How did it become natural? Was it like overnight, or did it take time?
No, the way I think is easiest to put it is like when you first start to play football, they give you a uniform, shoulder pads, thigh pads, this and that and the other, and you feel bulky and awkward. and you go out and you practice and whatever. But once you get in the game, you don't even know you have the suit on, the football uniform. And the creature suit was kind of the same way. It's bulky and it was awkward, but once you started shooting and you got into it, you don't even know you have it on till you get out of the water.
Any questions?
How long could you hold your breath for those takes in the original creature?
It depended on what you were doing. If you weren't doing anything, you know, just sitting and looking and whatever, you could hold your breath, you know, maybe 3 minutes. But if you got into an action scene, you know, where you're fighting, you're using up a lot of oxygen. And I'd say a minute, minute and a half at the most. And that's a long time.
It is.
When you're talking about footage. And we were able to accomplish most scenes when, you know, holding your breath one time. However, there's no problem because you just get new air, breathe for a little while, hyperventilate, and then go back in to do the scene, and then just go into a close-up and then back off again. So there was no problems with holding your breath and not going through the whole scene.
Do you ever see the air hoses in the scenes? The air coming from the hoses in the scenes?
I don't think you saw it coming from the hoses, but you did see it come from my head every now and then.
You still do a lot of swimming now?
Yeah, I say a lot. I swim maybe 3 times a week, a couple hours in the swimming pool. I just had shoulder replacement surgery. And by the way, it's the greatest doctor in the world. It's perfect. It took 3 months to recover from it. But I had pain, such drastic pain in my shoulder. Now I have no pain, and I can use it just like it was brand new. It's unbelievable.
Let's do that remake.
So why don't you do that remake? Yes.
I got to do the other shoulder first.
Did you ever sustain any serious injuries or any near-death experience?
No, we've had some, in filming, we've had some injuries. I've had one. No, actually I've had 2. One, when we were shooting, this was when we were shooting Sea Hunt. We went to Harbor Island to shoot some shark footage for the show. And it was about 80 or 90 feet deep to the bottom in the area where they said there were a lot of sharks. And we baited for the sharks for, I'd say 2 or 3 days and couldn't get any sharks. And all of a sudden they all showed up. So we made a number of dives to shoot shark footage. And I got the bends. And I had to be flown to Key West because in the Bahamas at that time they had no recompression chamber. And I got flown to Key West to the Navy Center where they have a chamber and put me back down under pressure for, you know, 4 or 5 hours or whatever. And I was fine. But getting the bends was what happened to me. And it happened to a couple of our guys over the years. But we learned to follow the rules a little better. We haven't gotten it lately. But I was speared in the leg during Thunderball. And not speared by someone. During a fight sequence, everybody fought in the show because we didn't have that many divers, and I was one of them. And I was fighting somebody, I forget doing what, on a deck, and we rolled down, and a spear gun had fallen against the side of the ship. And when I fell, my leg hit the spear, and the spear went in my leg. So I got speared in the leg by myself.
What part of your leg?
Right in the calf. Yeah. But it wasn't that serious. They unscrewed it and then they cut it out and it was fine. But that's the only accident I'd say. But we've had some other accidents with other divers, which were dumb accidents, but nobody got hurt seriously.
Now you mentioned you worked on Thunderball. How did you get involved with that project, and was working on Never Say Never Again a result of working on Thunderball? Because technically it was a remake. Yeah. How did that come across or come about?
I had worked at this Ivantor Studios in Florida. We had done Flipper and Sea Hunt and whatever. And we got a call from London that they were interested in shooting an underwater sequence for Thunderball. And would we be interested in talking about it? And said sure, so I went over to to London and met with Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, who were the producers. And I told them all about the different things we shot and whatever. And they were considering Cousteau for doing the sequences. And one other group, I can't remember who. But he said, well, why should we use you over Cousteau? Because he's been around longer than we have. And I said, well, the only thing I can think of is that we're a bunch of phonies, and he isn't. And what you're making is all phony. So we can do phony better than he can. And we got the job. Whether that caused it or not, I don't know.
And because of your work on Thunderball, did it parlay into your work into Never Say Never Again?
Yeah, they just called me and said, we're doing a remake, and would you be interested?
So they basically use the same setup, same crew and all that stuff from the
Well, in other words, the underwater crew I picked.
Okay.
So all they did was just tell me what they need and what they want to shoot. And Terrence Young, who was the director of Thunderball, was a nice guy and a very good director. And they knew how to shoot movies, because at lunchtime they'd have a table out, doors with a tablecloth on it, and wine and beer and God knows what on it. We don't do that. But anyway, I enjoyed having lunch with him. But he said, the way he put it to me, he said, you go do your thing, and if I don't like it, I'll tell you. And he says, I got no way to tell you how to do it, because you know what you're doing. And I never had a problem with it.
Yes.
I was wondering, I have a book about marine land that shows a lot of old pictures of the way they built marine land. Some of them were actually from the 30s when they first built it. And they show a lot of the property in there, and they show pictures of that Marine Land Hotel that's there.
Yes.
I was wondering, the scene in Revenge, the scene where John Agar and Laurie Nelson were staying at the hotel, where was that filmed?
I think it was filmed at that hotel.
At the original
Yeah.
Marine Land Hotel?
Yeah. That's where we were staying.
Because it shows like where the creature was hiding when he attacked the dog, and it shows like there's a little waterway next to the
There's a
hotel.
waterway next to Marine Land, an inland waterway.
Yeah, I know about that.
Yeah,
But it seems like the hotel was built more toward the beach.
it was. It was built just about on the beach.
Where did they shoot most of the Thunderball underwater stuff?
The who?
The Thunderball movie, where did you do most of the underwater work?
All of the underwater work for Thunderball was shot in the Bahamas and Nassau. A lot of it was shot at Goulden Key, and a lot of it Clifton Pier, and then other underwater locations. The topside was shot over on the island, Rose Island. And at that time, now it's built up so big, now you couldn't recognize any of the locations.
Why were they shot there? For the clarity of the water? Why were they shot there?
Why were the scenes shot there? That because we picked it for the clarity of the water. As well as, in the Bahamas, if you get bad weather out of one direction, you can always find a lee in another direction. Whereas in Florida, on the East Coast, if you get bad weather coming in, there's nowhere to go. You just can't shoot sometimes because of bad weather. And the water is cleaner in the Bahamas.
Do you have a project that you worked on that you consider your favorite?
I would say Thunderball, in that we were able to shoot without being worrying about a budget. And we just shot, and when you accomplished it, you did. You spent the money you needed to spend.
So they basically said no holds barred and just let you do what you wanted?
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you working on any projects, or are you assisting on any projects? Or what was maybe the last thing that you have done in the movie?
I've done a couple of commercials for a German company in the Bahamas with a dolphin about a year or so ago. But I haven't shot anything since then. But I've written a couple of things, and we sold one. We hoped would go, and it hasn't. And the producer that bought it died, so we now have it back. So we haven't done anything with it. So I haven't done anything recently.
questions.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you guys for sitting in with us, and thank you, Mr. Browning. You know, I've always loved your work, and you know, I will always enjoy it, and I'm sure everyone else appreciates it. And you know, thank you for all your years of all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry for the loud music we had.